kan ons nog bekostig om gesond te eet? Hoe duur is dit? Wat moet jy natuurlik insluit? En volgens sluit Leanne Kiezer, sy is 'n dieetkundige by ons aan om meer daaroor te gesels. Goeiemôre Leanne.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I think to start off, I want to ask you, what does healthy eating mean to you?
Oh, it's a great question. It's $1 million question because everyone has a different reference of what health means. Hopefully, I can bring you some clarity today on what that looks like. So remember, with a healthy, balanced diet, what we're looking for is a variety of different foods in the diet to make sure that you reach your nutrient requirements every day. So without getting too technical about it, you want to make sure that you get all the different food groups into your diet every day, because each one of those food groups has a specific different nutrient benefit to offer your body. And so if you're following a balanced, healthy diet, incorporating, for example, starchy foods and carbs, lean protein foods, your delicious dairy products, plenty of fruits and vegetables, of course, some healthy fats and oils. It's the blend and mixture of all these different food groups together that will help you achieve your best personal diet.
That's interesting that you mentioned that we actually do need all the food groups, because very often, people will go on certain diets and they go cut out everything in this food group or cut out everything in that food group. And now you're saying that we actually do need all the food groups.
Yeah, look, it's true. I think it's unfortunately quite a big culture of ours that we will, without necessarily doing all the research for our needs, go ahead and cut out a food group. It's, for example, has become a bit of a diet trend that now people who would like to lose weight cut out gluten. But this makes no sense, actually. Even the trend, for example, to cut out dairy, unless you've actually been diagnosed with a cow's milk allergy, it's actually not appropriate to cut dairy out of your diet, and it means that you're missing out on the opportunity to get important nutrients. And even for those, by the way, with lactose intolerance, the reflex is that if I have lactose intolerance, I have to cut dairy out of my diet completely. But this is not necessarily the case. And again, you're doing harm by cutting that excess food, that food group out of your diet. So, for example, if you look at yogurt, which is a really tasty, convenient, available food within the dairy category, yogurt actually contains live cultures, which are sort of special bacteria in yogurt that help it produce its yogurt-like properties. And those live cultures digest the lactose in yogurt, which means that people, even if they have lactose intolerance, can still benefit from getting dairy foods in their diet by having a yogurt with live cultures in it. And so I think overall we tend to be a bit extremist, may I say, about cutting out entire food groups out of your diet when it isn't indicated that you need to do so, unless there's a very specific medical reason. But really what happens in reality is that we're a nation of self-diagnosers, and we've heard a trend or a fad that perhaps cutting this food group out will help me, when really it isn't validated to do so, and you may be doing more harm than good.
Wow, I think that is very important. We may be doing more harm than good because we, like you say, we just decide to follow a trend. But I want to almost go the long-term extremes of what happens to your body when you cut out those nutrients over a period of time. In long-term, could actually be worse than helpful. And you might think, now I'm losing weight, and so that's why I'm cutting out X, Y, or Z. But actually, long-term, you're cutting out so many nutrients that you might need for your body to function. So thank you for the clarity and saying, balance is actually the key. Leanne, I think the big question is, do you think South Africans can afford to still eat healthy food?
It's such a good question. I mean, South Africans have been through a tough time, right? So in terms of riding food inflation and unemployment, and also this narrative, again, that following a healthy diet can be really expensive. So what is realistic? I will share that in good news, we see that inflation is actually starting to moderate and come down towards the end of last year and predicted over 2024. So this is super good news for people, trying to adopt healthy, balanced eating habits for their families. But I also would like to dispute the narrative that to have a healthy diet means that it has to be an expensive diet. This is not the case. And the way that we tend to choose foods or the way that we place value on foods today is that we will consider the instant satisfaction associated with a food. So we will make a food choice flippantly about, will this be able to satisfy my hunger right now in this moment? And if so, then I'll choose that food. And that's why we have such a big culture of, drinking sort of energy drinks, eating crackers, crisps, biscuits, and so on. Pretty much, hollow foods, which aren't adding much nutrient value. Whereas if you flip that conversation on its head and you say, what is the value of food in terms of the nutrients it brings me, and therefore the long-term health benefits that it can offer, which was your point just now, then the conversation becomes very different. Because then foods like your fruits and vegetables, for example, which are super nutrient dense, rich in vitamins and minerals, rich in fiber, they actually become a very valuable food group because they're cost effective to purchase and they're giving you that nutrient density. They're full of those rich nutrients that you need to sustain health today and into the long term. And another great example of a food group of this is again yogurt. So, as an example, if you were to pick up a little tub of yogurt, one of those sort of 100-gram servings that you usually would pop into your child's lunchbox, you're looking at around R3.80 for the tub, right? R3.80. And comparing that, for example, to, I don't know, something which is South Africa's reflex to grab on the go, which is a packet of crisps, you're looking at about R6 or R7. So like for like, already per serving, you can see that, yogurt is actually a more cost-effective option. Plus, then, the nutrient density of that yogurt is extremely important because suddenly we're introducing our body to a source of protein, calcium, micronutrients, and of course, these live cultures that I referred to earlier, which are helping to protect your long-term health. And in protecting your long-term health, regular consumption of fruits, vegetables, and yogurt actually help to prevent chronic diseases. So things like obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure. And ultimately, if you offset the cost, your emotional cost, your health cost, but also the very hard literal costs of compensating for a chronic disease, well, then suddenly that food cost equation becomes quite a different conversation.
Leanne, just before the break, we started speaking about convenience, how easy it is for us to choose certain foods. Nowadays, with load shedding, we decide, okay, we'll rather do takeaways than cooking. Is it really healthier for us to have those quick solutions, or is the good old cooking still better and more nutrient?
I suspect you already know the answer to that question. Just taking a stab at it. So, the trouble with the super convenient option of going for takeaways, even in the load shedding context, which I know offers a huge convenient solution, is that you have full control over how that food is prepared and what actually goes into it. So you enjoy what you think is just chicken, but that chicken has actually probably gone through a process of maybe deep frying, exposed to more oil and fat than it really needed to be cooked, or the way you would if you did it at home, and also amounts of excess salt. So the amount of excess salt or sodium and also fat that our sort of takeaway foods gets exposed to is really quite a lot. So overall, the message is that if you can rather prepare your meals at home, of course, this is the number one choice. You have control over how many vegetables you include in that meal, really add bulk to your meals by adding in vegetables. And you have control over how much fat and salt you're using to prepare that meal. And with a bit of planning, you can plan ahead around sort of the load shedding schedule, perhaps cook more meals on the weekend and have them ready prepared, just to dish up and go by the time load shedding hits during the week. There are some ways that you can really try to compensate and do your best to choose more meals that are cooked at home as opposed to your takeouts.
Leanne, I'd like to talk about the poor for a moment. How realistic financially is it for the poor to really eat healthy? I'll tell you why I ask you that. Because pap or maize is often the staple in those kind of households, and you have to feed about 8 mouths with very limited amount of money. So in the South African context, how financially viable is it for the poor to eat healthy?
Yeah, it's a super good question, especially in the prevalence of our raising unemployment rate. So, we've done research, and it costs about 4,300 Rand to feed an average family of 4 in South Africa what would be recommended an adequate, healthy diet. So 4,300 Rand is what we're looking at, which I think for many people would be surprised, actually, that is not as expensive as you anticipate. But for many people who are still, battling below the breadline and battling with single income households or no income households, this still becomes, a fair fee. It's a lot of money. And so, just your comments on maize meal and how far it goes to actually feed a family. Maize meal is something which is a useful food group. Remember that in South Africa, maize meal is actually enriched. It has added nutrients mandated by our Department of Health. So it's rich in B vitamins, iron, zinc, also vitamin A. So this is good news. And obviously yields sort of a hunger fill benefit as well. I think the main advice that we could give to people who are sort of battling on this breadline and really counting on maize as their hunger fill option is to really try their best to bolster the meal in any way they can to introduce variety. So by, cooking perhaps some homegrown spinach, for example, and adding it to the plate. This makes a huge length and stride in adding to the micronutrient density of that meal, adding to the diversity of that meal, and helping your family get extra nutrients in. Another good example is something like lentils. So lentils are a super cost-effective food. They go really far. And just by stirring some lentils into the maize that you might have prepared for your family, you help to increase the fiber and vitamin B content. And so, there are these small steps that can be taken to try and enhance what is already the sort of foundation food, which is maize meal, which is commonly eaten, just with a few small fortifications that will also, help to boost the nutrient content of that meal.
I'm so glad that Jenna asked that and that you actually give us some answers with regards to, if we think living healthily should be just expensive. You walk into a shop and there's always this, one section that's like healthy living, and that section tends to be more expensive. But actually something like maize that you said in South Africa that already by the department, you need certain things, homegrown spinach or lentils and stuff that we could potentially afford just to add that. It's really good news to hear that maybe our perception of what is healthy living isn't necessarily healthy living, and then we can make small strides, but that small strides will add so much benefit to how we eat.
Absolutely.
Leanne, a quick last question from me. Energy drinks, because you mentioned that earlier. How healthy are the energy drinks?
I regret mentioning them. It's unfortunately a growing trend in South Africa. And, a dietitian always says that there's no such thing actually as healthy or unhealthy, but we choose foods on a continuum, right? And they all have different roles to play in our diet in different moments. Holistically, you should get your fluid preferably from water and from beverages which don't have added sugar. This is primarily where you should get your hydration from, and actually adding that hydration to your body just in the form of regular tap water can often boost your energy levels and your mood. So prevent dehydration with water. That's the number one message. And then remember that with your energy drinks, they can be a source of added B vitamins, for example. They can be a source of added caffeine. But I would do my best to look past the marketing hype when it comes to these beverages and really remember that water is best.
There we go. Water is best, and hopefully when we have clean drinking water, that is something that South Africans can actually get to. Leanne, thank you so much for your time and for your effort and energy and educating us on healthy living. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Dit is natuurlik Leanne Kiezer, sy is dieetkundige en hoof van korporatiewe sake by Danone, wat nou vir jou gesê het, jy weet, om gesond te leef is tog nie so moeilik nie.